Hey everyone, it's Julie Young for Korean American Story and Not Your Average. Today I am sitting down with Danny Chung, formerly known as Decipher, sometimes still known as Decipher, right?
Yeah, I don't mind either or. A lot of people will still come up to me and call me by Decipher, and I guess other rappers or people who have a stage name or use monikers will be like upset, like, oh, you don't know me by my new name yet, but no, I'd embrace it all.
Nice. All right, cheers.
Cheers.
I've been trying to get Danny on Not Your Average for about 2 years now. I had to chase him out to LA to do it.
Elusive to say the least. But,
yeah, this is a little bit strange because I thought this would happen in Philly.
Yeah, like it can't be easy. You can't give in on your first call.
Swear with me for what? Swear with me for what? Swear with me for what?
But let's start from the beginning because I really want to know your story. I think it's so interesting. You were born in Philly?
Born in Philadelphia, yes. Moved around a lot. I think within like my first year, I moved to Chicago for a little bit, then moved back to the East Coast, Jersey. I pretty much moved around like literally every single year of my childhood until about 5th grade or so. And then I stayed in this house, moving back and forth from rags to riches, riches to rags.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit, because I was listening to an interview you did, and you were talking about how there was a certain point in your life where your family was pretty well off.
Yeah, I mean,
and that suddenly changed.
Right. I mean, my parents were pretty well-to-do. They came to America just like many immigrant families coming from Korea for that American dream. They were relatively well-educated. My mother came from Yonsei University with a nursing education, so she came to America looking for a nursing job. My father was a computer engineer, but when they came to America, they quickly saw that the fastest way to achieve those goals of big backyards and white picket fences and that whole thing was to start a business. They had a Dunkin' Donuts, they had a 7-Eleven, but then they did it kind of haphazardly. They just wanted the American dream faster than a lot of people wanted it. They wanted the biggest house on the block because they came from really poor backgrounds. I know my mother, she used to tell me stories about how her grandmother would make like takdoritang, like a spicy chicken stew, and then it would literally have to stretch out for a week to feed like 5 people, and then they would literally be like chewing on the bones and stuff. So they came from the dirt. They came from nothing, and then to come to America and still be broke. That was just unacceptable to her.
Young Brook, rest in peace. I'ma see you in the sky singing how when brothers fell victim to the street. Rest in peace, big brother. There's a heaven for a G. Be alive.
You had a pretty interesting experience when you went to go for your driver's license. Do you want to share that story?
So this is where like everything kind of turned around in terms of how I defined family and how family became contextualized in my life. So when I went to go get my driver's license, you need your social security and your birth certificate to go get your driver's license. And at that point, I realized, I'd never seen my driver's license, or I'd never seen my birth certificate. So I was curious. I was like, we were on the way to the DMV with my dad, and I was like, can I see my birth certificate? And he just got really like weird and like shaky, and he wouldn't make eye contact. He's like, no, don't worry about it. And that made me super curious. I was like, okay. Like I'm gonna keep that one in my head. Right. Like I'm not gonna ask about it now. I'm not gonna bother you now, but I will figure this out.
Right.
And then eventually, like that day or like a day after, I just snooped around my parents' room to find that birth certificate. I found it and I took a look at it, and then I looked at the the mother's name and the father's name, and I recognized the mother's name was actually my aunt's name. So the woman I grew up calling my aunt was my actual birth mother. And the father's name was a name I completely did not know at all. It was just a stranger. So everything just kind of flipped upside down, and then I just put pieces and pieces together, and I realized my birth mother was actually my aunt, which made a lot more sense just thinking about it in hindsight, because the person I called mother, and I still could to this day call her mother because that's the person who raised me, that's my mom. If you do the math, she was about like 42 or like 45 or something when I was born. So it didn't make much biological sense. But I never thought about that ever, because why would you think about that? Because she took me in when I was literally born. It was pretty much, I was adopted. I was adopted by my birth mother's sister, older sister.
Right.
I was kind of like a miracle child in a sense, because my mother never had a child prior because she miscarried a bunch of times and she just couldn't have a child, and her younger sister got pregnant and it was an unwanted birth. It was like when she was really young, she was probably about like, I don't know, 20 or something like that. And it kind of all just fell into place, per se.
What was that like as a 16-year-old finding that out? And did you go to your parents and say? No.
I didn't even tell them I knew.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't even tell them I knew at all.
So when? Ever?
Ever. I never told them I knew.
Wow. But your birth mom, your aunt, she knows you know now.
They know I know now because my uncle listened to listened to my music, and he understands English and he understands rap. He's the one that got me into rap.
Yeah.
He's the one that was a DJ when I was a little kid, and putting me on to like Kid and Play and Ultramagnetic MCs and watching Breakin' and all these things that he didn't even know I was really soaking in. I was just in the corner playing with my toys, but he was into hip hop.
So you're 16 and you figure this out.
Yeah.
Like, what was that like for a 16-year-old?
And it was a roller coaster actually, because at first I was like, wow, this is huge. Like this changes everything. But then I was like, does it really change everything? Because
it does, but it doesn't.
Yeah, does it really change everything? Because I'm not gonna stop calling mom. Like, she's the one that raised me. She's the one that changed my diaper. She's the one that put me to school. These are the parents that drove me an hour out to the suburbs every day so I could get a better education. But then I was like, damn, biologically, it changes the whole narrative. Like, this changes my whole story.
Right.
And then, do I bring it up to them? Like, do I make it weird for them? Like, do I make them decide? And then I started remember, like, again, hindsight, remembering these things in time. I remember this one point in third grade when I was like living with my aunt, which was my actual birth mother. And then I think there was like a kind of there's a shift there during that period of time where like she was getting older. Her biological clock was ticking. She never had a child of her own. She actually did, which was me, but she never like got the chance to raise a child. She got to that point and she kind of wanted me back or something. And then there was kind of like a tug of war at that point, which I didn't realize at all.
Right.
But then I remember like my dad picking me up from her house, from my aunt's house, and there's them fighting, and like there's like a literal tug of war. I think I settled on, you know what, it doesn't matter as much as I think it does. It matters in a sense that happened, and it's good that I know. I'm glad that I wasn't ignorant of it. Your mother's who raises you, and there's no animosity either to my aunt giving me up to my mother. I mean, I think it worked out better for everybody in the grand scheme of things.
Your biological mom is still in Philadelphia, right?
My biological mom is still in Philadelphia.
Your aunt.
Yeah, my aunt. So
do you ever think of any part of your identity as an adoptee? Because like to me, I think of you as an adoptee.
Yeah. Technically.
Because technically you are, but it's sort of like because your whole life you didn't really think you were until you were 16. How does that come into your identity? Yeah, technically I would definitely have to say I'm an adoptee because I was raised by, not my biological, not my biological parents. I know, like you said, I never grew up thinking that way or knowing it. And I had to find out myself. But I guess, a lot of adoptees would share that same narrative, right? I mean, sometimes you don't get told that. I don't know, what do you think? What do you think is a better avenue to take? I think it's so personal. I think, every adoptee has their own journey and it's very personal.
I know it's close, but it wasn't always that way. It took a bad day, Danny, you better man up. Or whatever dad say, didn't give my mom enough presents, regret my past ways. Future looks brighter for now, I'm where the shadow casts say.
Do you ever think about your birth father?
Now that my birth mother knows that I know, she's confronted me and asked me, like, do you want to meet your birth father? And then at that time I said no, not because I was angry or distant from the situation or anything, because like I said, I was just happy how it was. Right. And I guess I just didn't want to disturb that, and why make it more complicated than it has to be. That was around when my mom, the one that raised me, passed away. I was about like 20, 21, something like that. She asked me if I wanted to meet my birth father. Like he was, I don't know if she was still in contact or if I don't know if she was actually able to put me in contact with him. But I just said no right off the bat. And honestly, I'm more curious if he has other children. So I'd be more curious if I have siblings more so than actually meeting him per se. So even till this day, I'm still more curious about that if I have siblings, because I grew up an only child.
Because that, that's another thing. It's like being an only child your whole life. If you were to find out you had siblings, it's this other identity. You know what I mean? Like even in my adopted family, I'm the second oldest of 6, so I've always thought of myself as one of the older children. In my Korean family, I'm the baby, and it's a totally different identity and like place in the family.
Right.
So I kind of like being the baby.
Yeah. I mean, being the only child definitely played its part in my life. The stigma with being an only child is that you're spoiled and you're this, you're that. But again, I don't think I grew up like a normal only child. Like I said, I was back and forth from being poor and like being really poor and being like really well off or whatever. And then so I never got a chance to be like fully spoiled. And like I barely cried, my parents said, which is a weird thing. But I think that came from a place of just, I don't know, seeing that back and forth from being a have to a have not, like all the time.
Did you ever struggle with your Korean American identity when you were growing up? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I think that's the general story. When you're a hyphenated American, you tiptoe and you have to tightrope between that hyphen, of Korean and American. That hyphen is literally like a tightrope. You're trying to balance where you stand. I visited Korea a lot, even throughout my childhood. I mean, I'm sure it's almost like a cliche at this point, but being in Korea, you don't feel Korean enough. In America, you don't feel American enough. So you're stuck on that hyphen. You're just, trying to balance on that hyphen. You're tightroping that. And then, and you grow up in school being, like I said, I didn't get taunted like as much or like whatever. But yeah, as the other kids, Asian are good at math or take karate and get picked on and shit like that. That's why maybe I adhered to hip hop more, because it was more about machismo and bravado and being tough. Like I didn't have like a little father figure raising me. So like, Tupac, Biggie, Bone Thugs, these were my father figures and stuff like that raised me to be a little bit tougher or whatever.
Well, Danny, I just want to acknowledge you because I love you. And you're such a creative, ambitious, hardworking, kind person. And you're like so humble. And I just wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Feel like I'm Superman. Feel like I'm feeling it. Feel I'ma do my things. How you feel? Feel like $1 million. Feeling so fly. I'll never feel like falling. I gotta feel